From the personal log of Cham, senior correspondent for the Galactic Scientific Achievement Archives, the gravel crunched beneath my hoverpod as I settled it onto what could generously be called a landing pad. In reality, it was nothing more than packed earth and scattered stones. I couldn't hide my dismay as I observed my surroundings through the pod's crystalline viewport. Fields. Endless fields of green vegetation stretched to the horizon, broken only by the occasional cluster of trees and a modest dwelling that could only be described as primitive. This had to be a mistake. The Charles McDonald, the brilliant mind who had unlocked the secrets of stable wormhole creation, couldn't possibly live here. Yet my navigation system insisted this was the correct location. 41.9780 deg N, 93.2690 deg W. Earth, Iowa. The middle of nowhere. I extended my environmental sensors and was shocked to find the atmosphere was completely unfiltered. No air purification systems, no radiation shields, not even basic atmospheric stabilizers. Just nature. How did humans survive like this? As I completed my post-landing checklist, a figure emerged from the dwelling. He wore what appeared to be artificially aged fabric coverings and carried a container of liquid that my scanners identified as a primitive stimulant called coffee. Despite my extensive research before this interview, I still found myself startled by his appearance. This weathered, sun-darkened human bore little resemblance to the sharp-eyed scientist from the archival footage I'd studied. That footage, oh, how it had inspired generations. I remembered watching it in my early education pods, McDonald's standing before the World Scientific Council, explaining how his breakthrough would change everything. The equations floating in the holoprojector behind him described the impossible, a way to fold space-time that wouldn't collapse under its own gravitational stress. The mathematician's hands had danced through the projection, manipulating variables with the confidence of a master artist. "Well, are you going to sit in there all day, or would you like some coffee?" His voice through my external audio pickup was warm, amused. Nothing like the precise, clipped tones from the historic recordings. I checked my translator one final time and emerged from my pod, trying not to show my discomfort at the feeling of organic matter beneath my footpads. "Dr. McDonald, I am Cham of the Chuck," he interrupted, smiling. "Nobody's called me doctor in years. Come on up to the porch. Morning's the best time to watch the corn grow." I followed him, my confusion growing with each step. My research indicated that the growth rate of this corn was far too slow to observe in a single sitting. Was he making a joke? Humans did that sometimes, though I had never quite grasped the purpose. "Sir, I must admit I'm perplexed. The last public record of your work was the successful establishment of the Mars-Titan transit line. You disappeared shortly after. The scientific community has been speculating about your next breakthrough for years." Chuck settled into what appeared to be a manually operated rocking mechanism and gestured for me to take the adjacent seat. I did so with trepidation, half expecting the archaic wooden structure to collapse under my weight. "That's because there wasn't going to be a next breakthrough," he said, sipping his coffee and gazing out at the fields. "I'd done what I set out to do. Humanity had its road to the stars. It was time for me to come home." "Home?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice synthesizer. "But your mind, your genius, you could have pushed the boundaries even further. Intergalactic travel, temporal manipulation. The possibilities were endless." He turned to look at me then, and for a moment I saw a flash of the man from those historic recordings, that piercing intelligence, that deep understanding of the universe's greatest mysteries. But it was tempered now by something else, something I couldn't quite identify. "Tell me, Cham," he said quietly, "have you ever watched a seed grow into something that can feed a family? Have you ever felt soil run through your fingers and realized you're holding 1 billion years of cosmic chemistry? Have you ever looked at a field of wheat and seen the same patterns that govern the formation of galaxies?" I hadn't, of course. And I was beginning to suspect this interview wasn't going to go at all the way I had planned. "Would you like to see how it all works?" Chuck asked, setting down his empty coffee mug. Before I could remind him that I was here to discuss wormhole physics, not agriculture, he was already heading down the porch steps. I followed him, my sensor arrays automatically adjusting to filter out the overwhelming organic particles in the air. Humans called it pollen, a primitive reproductive mechanism for their plant life. Chuck seemed to pay it no mind as he walked between rows of tall, green stalks. "What you're seeing here isn't just corn," he said, kneeling down and gesturing for me to join him. I hesitated, my research on Earth bacteria making me reluctant to make contact with the soil. But something in his expression, That same look he had when explaining quantum tunneling to the World Scientific Council made me lower myself to his level. "Look here," he said, gently brushing away some soil to reveal a complex network of thin white filaments. "This is mycelium. A fungal network that connects every plant in this field. They're sharing nutrients, sharing information, creating a web of life that's more complex than any computer network we've built." I adjusted my microscopic sensors, and my neural processors almost froze in shock. The complexity of the chemical and electrical signals passing through this network was staggering. It was like watching the quantum probability waves of a forming wormhole, but entirely natural. "But this is," I paused, processing. "This is remarkably similar to your wormhole stabilization matrices." Chuck's eyes crinkled with delight. "Now you're getting it. Where do you think I got the idea? Nature figured out long ago how to create stable networks through seemingly empty space. I just adapted the principle to a cosmic scale." He stood brushing dirt from his knees. "Come on, there's more to see." Over the next 2 hours, Chuck led me through his farm, and with each step my understanding shifted. What I had dismissed as primitive was anything but. He showed me how he used companion planting to create natural pest control systems, how his irrigation methods mimicked ancient aquifers, how each element supported the others in a dance of biological mathematics that rivaled any equations I'd ever studied. "The problem with modern science," he said as we watched a group of insects he called bees moving from plant to plant, "is that we too often try to conquer nature instead of learning from it. Every solution we need is right here, if we just pay attention." But I protested. "Your work on wormhole physics revolutionized space travel. Surely that's more significant than this." I gestured at the fields around us. Chuck stopped and turned to face me. "Did you know that Earth loses about 23 billion tons of fertile soil every year? That's the real crisis. What good is it to reach the stars if we destroy the very thing that makes human life possible? Every farm like this one is a step toward healing our world." I watched as he knelt again, this time pulling what he called a weed from between his crop rows. The care with which he examined its root structure, the way he explained how even this unwanted plant had its place in the greater ecosystem, it was the same precision and passion he had once applied to quantum mechanics. "Besides," he added with a wink, "maintaining a sustainable permaculture system is a lot more challenging than mapping quantum fields. Trust me, I've done both." As the sun reached its zenith, we made our way back toward the house. My data cores were struggling to process everything I'd learned. The farm wasn't just a collection of primitive agricultural techniques, it was a living laboratory, each section an experiment in working with nature rather than against it. And Chuck McDonald, the man I had come to interview about humanity's greatest scientific achievement, was still very much a scientist. He had simply chosen to apply his genius to a different kind of challenge. As we sat down for the midday meal, all of it grown on his farm, Chuck proudly informed me, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my neural pathways since I arrived. But why give it all up? The acclaim, the resources, the chance to push human understanding even further, was it not fulfilling? Chuck carefully buttered what he called a homemade biscuit before responding. "Let me tell you a story about discovery," he said. "Back when I was working on wormhole theory, I hit a wall. The math was perfect, but every simulation ended in collapse. I was frustrated, burned out, ready to quit." He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "One morning I went for a walk in the botanical gardens near the research center. There was this old groundskeeper there, must have been in his 80s, tending to the soil. He saw me looking frustrated and invited me to help him plant some seedlings. At first I thought it was a waste of time, but as he taught me about how plants create vast underground networks, how they share resources through fungal connections, something clicked. The way nature created stable passages through soil to share nutrients, it was the key to stabilizing wormholes. My breakthrough came from watching plants grow. I set down my utensil, my meal forgotten. You're saying that farming inspired the McDonald field theory? Nature had already solved the problem of connecting distant points through seemingly empty space. He smiled. I just translated it to a cosmic scale. But here's the thing, Cham, that discovery taught me something more important than wormhole physics. He stood and walked to the window, gesturing at his fields. Out there, I'm not just growing food. I'm preserving knowledge that humanity has gathered over thousands of years. Knowledge about how to work with nature, how to sustain life, how to heal the earth instead of just abandoning it for the stars. But surely with modern technology, I began. Technology is a tool, not a solution, he interrupted gently. Look at what we've done to this planet with our advanced methods. We've depleted the soil, poisoned the water, changed the climate. Every farm like this one is a living library of sustainable practices that humanity can't afford to forget. I found myself looking at the fields with new understanding. Each plant, each insect, each microscopic organism was part of a vast, intricate system, one that humans had learned to work with over millennia of trial and error. The day I realized I could do more good here than in any laboratory was the day I truly understood what progress means. Chuck continued. We're so focused on reaching the stars that we forget to take care of the one planet we know can support us. He turned back to me, and I saw not the retirement of a great mind, but the evolution of one. My work on wormholes connected distant points in space. But this. He gestured to encompass the farm, the fields, the complex web of life he'd shown me. This connects humanity to its past and its future. That's the greatest discovery I've ever made. As I prepared to leave that evening, Chuck pressed a small package into my hands. Seeds, he explained, from his heritage tomato plants. Plant them, he said. Watch them grow. There's more wisdom in a single seed than in all our physics textbooks combined. I carefully stored the package in my specimen compartment, knowing that my article would be very different from what I had planned. I had come seeking to understand why a great mind had turned away from science. Instead, I discovered he hadn't turned away at all. He had simply found a greater application for it. My final glimpse as my hoverpod lifted off was of Chuck McDonald, the man who had unlocked the secrets of interstellar travel, kneeling in his garden, hands deep in the soil of the planet he had chosen to save. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.